There is a question at the center of the movie Obsession that I do not believe audiences are taking seriously enough. Who is the villain? Is it Bear? Is it Nikki? Is it Bear's friends who helped set events in motion? Or is it the supernatural entity that possesses Nikki, suppresses her will, imprisons her inside her own body, and turns affection into obsession? That may sound like an easy question. There is a literal demonic presence in the story. Surely, that is the villain. And yet, after watching the public reaction to this movie, I am not convinced that this is how many viewers understand it. The reaction to Bear has been visceral. People do not merely see him as insecure, indecisive, immature, or mistaken. They see him as morally repulsive. They treat his desire for Nikki as if that desire itself is evidence that something is wrong with him. And that concerns me. Not because Bear is the kind of man I believe men should aspire to become. He is not. Bear is indecisive. He lacks confidence. He does not possess the masculine assertiveness that might have allowed him to approach Nikki honestly and accept whatever answer she gave him. He spends too much time imagining a relationship and not enough time acting with courage in the real world. Those are genuine shortcomings, but shortcomings are not the same thing as villainy. Weakness is not evil. Indecision is not evil. Social awkwardness is not evil. And wanting a woman who may not want you in return is not by itself evil. That last distinction matters because our culture appears increasingly unwilling to make it. Bear is in love with Nikki, or at least he believes he is. He wants her affection but does not have the courage to speak openly to her. When he obtains an object that supposedly grants a wish, he wishes that Nikki would love him more than anyone else in the world. The wish comes true, but it does not create love. It creates possession. Nikki becomes intensely attached to Bear, but the person pursuing him is no longer entirely Nikki. Another entity is controlling her body. Nikki remains trapped inside, conscious of what is happening but unable to govern her own actions. Her free will has been taken from her. That is the true horror of the story. The horror is not that Bear wants Nikki. The horror is that something else takes control of Nikki and turns her into an instrument for satisfying that desire. This is also where Bear's moral responsibility has to be examined honestly. He made the wish. He wanted an outcome without having to face the vulnerability of asking Nikki directly. He attempted to bypass reality. He wanted the certainty of being loved without the risk of hearing no. That was irresponsible. It was selfish. It was an attempt to receive something that should only be given freely. But even here, the situation is more complicated than many viewers allow. Bear did not fully understand what he was purchasing. He did not know with certainty that the wish would work. He did not knowingly ask for a demon to imprison Nikki inside her own body. And once he realized what was happening, he did not celebrate her captivity. He tried to reverse it. Eventually, he sacrificed himself so that Nikki could be free. That does not erase his original mistake, but it does reveal something about his character. A villain who values possession above another person's freedom would not surrender the object of his desire. Bear does. When he finally understands the cost of what has happened, he chooses Nikki's freedom over his own life. That is not the action of an uncomplicated villain. It is the action of a deeply flawed man who recognizes the consequences of his mistake and pays the highest possible price to correct it. Yet public discussion often seems more interested in punishing Bear for being the wrong kind of man. He is not confident. He is not charismatic. He is not sexually experienced. He does not know how to speak to Nikki. He wants her, but she does not initially choose him. That combination immediately places him inside two modern categories, the nice guy and the incel. Once those labels are applied, meaningful examination usually ends. The label becomes the argument. An incel is assumed to be bitter, dangerous, entitled, and potentially violent. A nice guy is assumed to be performing kindness as a covert transaction, expecting sex or romance as payment. And certainly some men behave in exactly those ways. Some men believe kindness places women under an obligation to reward them. Some men become hateful when affection is not returned. Some men refuse to accept rejection. That behavior should be confronted directly. But we lose moral clarity when we take the worst examples of lonely men and use them to define every man who is lonely. A man is not evil because women do not choose him. A man is not dangerous merely because he struggles socially. He is not immoral because he desires companionship. And he does not become a villain simply because the woman he loves does not love him in return. The moral issue begins with what he does in response to that reality. Does he accept her decision? Does he govern himself? Does he become resentful and vindictive? Does he attempt to manipulate her? Does he threaten her? Does he try to override her will? Those actions tell us something about his character. His loneliness alone does not. This is where I believe the reaction to obsession exposes a cultural problem. Many people are no longer merely condemning coercion. They are condemning the man's desire before the coercion even occurs. Bear's wish is treated as the final expression of what viewers already believe about him, that the quiet, uncertain, romantically unsuccessful man is inherently suspicious. The supernatural plot then becomes a way of taking that suspicion to its most horrific possible conclusion. Bear wants a woman who does not choose him, and therefore the story places her inside a relationship in which her choice is literally removed. The symbolism is obvious, but symbolism should not replace moral distinctions. Bear's desire is not identical to the demon's possession. His insecurity is not identical to abuse. His failure to approach Nikki directly is not the same as taking control of her body. If we combine all these things into a single moral category, we stop judging actions and begin judging types of people. And I think that is dangerous. There is a revealing moment in the movie when Nikki briefly regains enough control to communicate with Bear. She asks him to kill her. Bear responds by asking whether being with him is really so terrible that death would be preferable. Many viewers interpret that statement as another example of his selfishness. They argue that he is still centering himself while Nikki is suffering. I understand that criticism, but I also understand Bear's reaction. The woman he loves is asking him to end her life. He is horrified, confused, emotionally overwhelmed, and still struggling to understand what has happened. His question is not necessarily a declaration that Nikki owes him a relationship. It is the wounded response of a man confronting the possibility that his very presence is experienced as something worse than death. And we should be careful here. Nikki is not simply saying that she dislikes Bear. She is asking him to kill her because she has been possessed. She has lost control over her body and has been trapped beneath the will of another being. Her horror is captivity. It is the destruction of her agency. It is not merely that she has been forced to date an awkward man. That distinction disappears in much of the cultural reaction. The story contains a literal demon, but Bear receives the greater hatred. That tells me the audience may be bringing something into the movie that did not originate entirely within the movie. We are living in an intensely individualistic culture. The highest moral principle is often presented as personal choice: what I want, how I feel, what fulfills me, and what allows me to express myself. Individual choice is valuable. Adults should not be treated as property. A relationship without meaningful consent is not a loving relationship. But individual desire is not the only moral consideration in human life. There is also responsibility. There is duty. There is family. There is community. There is the question of what is good for people beyond ourselves. For most of human history, relationships and marriages did not take place entirely between two isolated individuals who happened to feel romantic chemistry. Families were involved, communities were involved, parents evaluated potential partners. Marriage joined households, responsibilities, resources, and future generations. Romantic affection could be present, but it was not always treated as the only legitimate foundation for forming a family. That historical reality does not mean women had no will, nor does it mean every older system was just. There were coercive arrangements, abusive families, and social customs that treated people unfairly. Those things should not be romanticized. But neither should we pretend that the modern dating system is the only morally serious way human beings have ever formed relationships. Our culture has elevated personal romantic choice to such a degree that almost every external influence is interpreted as oppression. Parental guidance becomes interference. Community expectations become control. Duty becomes emotional imprisonment. Staying when the feeling has weakened becomes inauthenticity. And a relationship formed for practical, familial, or social reasons is assumed to be inferior to one formed through chemistry. That assumption deserves examination. People once married for stability, survival, family continuity, shared faith, mutual responsibility, and the welfare of children. Love was not always understood exclusively as the feeling that caused marriage. Sometimes love was something cultivated within the duties of marriage. Again, none of this justifies what happens to Nikki. A demon taking control of her body is not family guidance, community involvement, courtship, or duty. It is possession. It is an extreme violation of personhood. But the public response to the movie appears to place several very different things on the same continuum. A man wants a woman. The woman does not initially choose him. The man is insecure and unable to approach her. Therefore, his desire is suspect. He makes a foolish wish. Therefore, he represents every nice guy who secretly believes women owe him affection. A demon possesses Nikki. Therefore, Bear's original desire is revealed as inherently monstrous. I reject that chain of reasoning. Bear's method is wrong. His weakness contributes to the tragedy. His refusal to confront reality creates an opening for something evil. But his desire to be loved is not evil. His longing for Nikki is not evil. His social failure is not evil. Even his wish, although selfish and irresponsible, does not prove that he knowingly intended to imprison her mind and violate her will. When he understands what has happened, he does not continue pretending that the possessed Nikki represents genuine love. He recognizes that she is trapped. He tries to undo the wish, and in the end, he gives up his life to restore hers. That matters. Bear is not the masculine ideal. A stronger man would have spoken. A stronger man would have risked rejection. A stronger man would have faced the truth instead of reaching for supernatural certainty. A stronger man would have understood that love must be offered, not manufactured. But a weak man is not automatically a wicked man. Sometimes weakness produces terrible consequences. Sometimes cowardice allows evil to enter where courage might have prevented it. That makes strength morally important. It does not mean weakness and evil are identical. And this is where the attack on the nice guy becomes culturally destructive. We once encouraged uncertain young men to become stronger. We told them to develop confidence, discipline, competence, and courage. We told them to become the kind of men capable of carrying responsibility. Increasingly, we simply ridicule them. We call them pathetic. We call them creepy. We call them incels. We assume their loneliness must be evidence of some concealed hatred of women. Then we act surprised when some of these men become resentful, alienated, and unwilling to participate in society. Mockery is not formation. Humiliation is not guidance. A culture cannot endlessly tell struggling men that they are unwanted, unnecessary, and potentially dangerous, and then expect those men to develop healthy relationships with that culture. That does not excuse bitterness or violence. Every man remains responsible for his conduct, but responsibility works in more than one direction. Communities also bear responsibility for the values they teach, the behavior they reward, and the people they abandon. Bear needed courage. He needed truth. He needed someone to tell him that his desire was understandable, but that he had to face Nikki as a free person. He needed to hear that rejection would hurt, but that surviving rejection was part of becoming a man. He did not need to be told that wanting love made him a monster. So, who is the villain of obsession? Bear is responsible for his choices. His friends bear responsibility for their participation. Nikki is a victim whose freedom is taken from her. But the true villain is the entity that possesses her, the force that imitates love while destroying freedom. That is what obsession does. Love sees another person as someone whose good must be respected. Obsession sees another person as the answer to a private hunger. Love can endure the word no. Obsession attempts to make no impossible. Bear does not begin the movie as a villain. He begins as an inadequate man looking for a shortcut around courage. That shortcut opens the door to evil. But when he finally sees that evil clearly, he rejects it. And he gives his life to release the woman he once wanted to possess. We do not need to pretend Bear is admirable in every respect. We do not need to deny Nikki's suffering. And we do not need to defend coercion in order to reject the cultural hatred directed toward lonely and socially unsuccessful men. We simply need to judge accurately. Desire is not possession. Weakness is not wickedness. Loneliness is not hatred. And a man's failure to be chosen does not make him the villain. Sometimes the villain is exactly what the story tells us it is. The thing that destroys freedom, imitates love, and turns one human being into an object for another. The tragedy of obsession is that Bear realizes this too late. The tragedy of our response may be that many viewers never realize it at all.